Welcome to the Arts and Antique Radio Show, where your host, nationally recognized certified appraiser Elizabeth Stewart, Santa Barbara's treasure sleuth, will help you put a value on the treasures in your own home.
Every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven?
So let's find out. How valuable is it?
Hello, Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. And a while ago, my dear friend and colleague Gail Eisen brought me a marvelous young artist, Si Jie Loo. And she is actually Malaysian, but studied Ivy League and then ended up here as a fellow and has been painting wonderful things. And then Gail sent me a quick email saying, Si Jie, in conjunction with a friend of hers, Jasmine Kumalah, has written a book that really interested Gail, and that was Holding Demons in Small Jars. Jasmine did the text, and Si Jie Loo did the illustrations. And, part of this is that, Gail, you know what I got to say. It's these young people with such inspiration, and they take such great risks, and they're so brave to sit and write a book. And I was really impressed. So what this is what it's been described. Let me read a little bit. Lyrical and brutal, Jasmine Kumalah's Holding Demons in Small Jars brilliantly relays a true tale we need to hear, especially in the West. And I asked CG for Jasmine's bio. She's born in Belgium. She's Sierra Leonese and Tongolese American. She resides in Durham, North Carolina, Yale, along with my son Lockie. They're both in Durham. Holding Demons in Small Jars is her first novel and was inspired by her experience during the Sierra Leonean Civil War. Now, Si Jie Loo is also one of these cross-international border types of women. She's Malaysian. She married. Now, your husband, Si Jie, is Kenyan. She married a Kenyan man, and she's living in Santa Barbara now. I had the pleasure of reading the book and having it dropped off to me so I could see the beautiful illustrations, and of course, Si Jie did the illustrations, and the evocative and really wrenching poetry that Jasmine's put in the book about the Sierra Leone Civil War. I asked Gail to join us today because she has a sort of a lifetime consulship in working with grief and stages of life, and there's a lot of that in this book. And I'd like to start the interview by asking Si Jie to tell us a little bit about the book. And then we've also got Jasmine on the line, too. She's going to talk to us a little bit. But Si Jie, tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, the book, besides the story that is very personal to Jasmine, it's celebration of a lifelong collaboration between me and my best friend. Jasmine and I were friends in college, but our friendship really blossomed post-graduation because we would have bi-weekly conversations about life and how to pursue our career as artists and writers, and we would discuss things from philosophy to everyday practical stuff as young adults. And so for us to really voice out our intentions, we have to do something. And so this book is a few years in making of this sort of actively pursuing our collaboration and our admiration for each other's art forms.
And so when you were illustrating the book, was it difficult to get into the text?
It wasn't. I think Jasmine has a very a lot of imagery in her writing. Mm-hmm. It's very, like you said, very poetic, simple language, but really telling a story from multiple standpoint. And so for me, it's very easy to enter her world. And her actually, she has some of the photos that she took from Sierra Leone when she visited in 2013. That's really what inspired the whole thing. And from her photos, I get the mood of of the story and the people. So even though it's, the story itself is set in a fictional country in Bantunia, we took a lot of the cues of, the cultures, the people, the bay, which is like the slum versus the city, all of that.
Yeah. Dickensian almost.
Yeah.
Jasmine, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Jasmine. So what's the weather in Durham?
What'd you say?
What's the weather like in Durham?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Is it?
Absolutely gorgeous. It's definitely spring already.
So
We're lucky now.
my son lives in Durham. He graduated Duke and he ended up marrying a Dookie, and he lives in Durham, and he calls it Durham. So it's Durham, not Durham, but Durham. I want you to tell us a little bit about the outline of the book. I know it involves young men, so tell us just in very brief terms the outline of the book.
Okay. So Holding Demons in Small Jars follows Detective Alou.
Uh-huh.
He's a detective in this fictional country called Bantunia in the city of Diamante. And basically he's tasked with finding out what happened to 3 boys who were murdered in a neighborhood called the Bay. And so it follows him on sort of this journey as he's trying to figure out who the perpetrators of this crime are, but it becomes more about witnessing this country, his city, in this time after a very brutal civil war.
I see. This comes from a personal story of yours, is that right?
Yeah, so it's inspired by the Sierra Leonean Civil War. It's something that my family and I went through when I was a kid in 97 and then 99. I really wanted to write about the war, but I felt that a lot of the times we focus on what happens during the war, but not what happens after the war.
Oh, wow.
And so the story for me was really about thinking about the psychological effects of war. Right? We talk a lot about the physical violence, and not enough of an eye is given for the traumas that people suffer that can't be so easily witnessed.
So I want to read you something, Jasmine, and so in your collaboration with Si Jie Loo and the beautiful book Holding Demons in Small Jars, a reading from Arnold Weinstein's Morning, Noon, and Night, Finding the Meaning of Life Stages. I thought this was appropriate, Gail. Life Stages Through Books. I quote from this. When a friend of mine was once asked, "Do you know much about Shakespeare?" She answered, "Not as much as he knows about me." It is possible that great writers know us better than we know ourselves. Maybe their creations might serve as touchstones for our own self-knowledge. That's possible. Books house home truths. Harold Bloom points out that we know far more about Hamlet than we do about most of our best friends. And the young prince's assertion that theater holds up a mirror to nature also describes the mirror that it holds up to ourselves. Yet there is another answer to this question about art's relevance to our own self-knowledge. And here I want to emphasize, and here's when I want you to prick up your ears, Jasmine. I want to emphasize the actual historicity of art. What frequently shocks me most in reading works is their bite and pungency, their often disturbing relevance for our moment. Oversubscribed to notions of progress as people, we often live with the fantasy that it was all so different then during the war, as well as the conviction that now is unique, unforeseen, not prophesized. But the great stories tell us otherwise. I read that and I thought of your book. So, this is the thing. When you're actually hit by the muse, right? Hit by that muse, you tell stuff that's beyond your years, beyond your time, and beyond the actual historicity of the actual story itself. And it really struck me about your book this way. Gail, I want you to talk a little bit about Si Jie's art, what it meant to you in this book.
Thank you, Elizabeth. First of all, hello, Jasmine.
Hey, Jasmine.
We haven't met before. Hello, and kudos to you. I wanted to tell you it was just really an unusual portrait that you've painted of a war-weary population. There's such a sense of heaviness and weariness and exhaustion among that populace. And then, in combination with CJ's lovely pastel watercolors, it not only brought it to life for me, but it became very vivid, and also it represented a kind of counterpoint, a very humane
well
counterpoint
put.
to the story.
Yeah, the lightness of the colors.
Yes,
yeah.
I very much appreciated both of your contributions.
Yeah. So the issue with the book, in the main question in my mind is what happens? What's the next chapter? If this book is the first chapter, Jasmine and Si Jie, what's the next chapter? Richard's giving us the high sign, but I want to go to quick break. When we get back, I want you both to address that. You can chat over the break between you two.
Okay.
You'll still be able to hear as we go to commercial break. Don't turn that dial. My great friend, Dr. Gail Eisen, is here, and we've also got Si Jie Loo, and we've also on the phone got Jasmine Kumalah. Jasmine and Si Jie, at their, how old are you guys?
She's 25, I'm 28.
Mid-20s, authors of a darling and evocative and poetic and moving book about Jasmine's actual duration as a childhood through the Sierra Leone's War. Don't turn that dial. What intrigues me is that, you know, you've got these young folks, Jasmine Kumalah, 25 years old, and Si Jie Loo, 28 years old, already undertaken their first book together. But you know what's so interesting, Gail, is, you know, I grew up in a little farm town in Illinois, and I think there was one black family in town. That was it. And now we've got, you know, sitting in front, we've got Si Jie from Malaysia, married to a Kenyan. Her best friend is Sierra Leonese, coming from Tonga. I mean, it's just incredible. And then her residency at the Squire Foundation on top of it, which is another level, you know, of cross-internationalism.
And I think that we have to thank the educational system, higher education in the United States, because beginning in about the 1970s, there was an influx of students from many overseas countries, and I'm a product of that as well. From my undergrad and graduate best friendships and working in international dormitories.
That's true, isn't it?
Absolute.
Yeah. So you were the first guard, and then now we have this guard where your best friend is such from a whole different cultural milieu, and so is your husband, Si Jie. It's just amazing. So I'm going to pass the ball for our short time. We're going to change horses at 10:30 today. But before I do that, I'm going to pass the ball over to Si Jie Loo, who's going to be interviewing Jasmine, her co-author in this book, co-conspirator in this book, about your next or her next project. So go ahead, Si Jie.
So, Jasmine, you told me last week in our phone conversation that you're already ramping up your next project that I'll be illustrating, right? What's the name of the book?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I get a lot of questions about Holding Demons in Small Jars. It's a pretty small book, and a lot of people ask me why I didn't write more, and I tell them honestly that Holding Demons in Small Jars was, for one thing, really important for me to sort of process the Sierra Leonean Civil War for both myself, my family, and my community. And I really wanted to write it, as much as was needed, right? So it felt completed in this level, and I'm very sort of at peace with what I was able to write through with it.
Jasmine,
so my next project,
Jasmine, I have to interrupt you. Next time people say, why isn't the book longer? You can tell them that there's a philosophy. You know, I'm an appraiser of fine art, and I look at art all the time. So there's a philosophy when you talk about artistic composition. And you can tell folks, well, why isn't this book longer? The issue is it's with composition. Composition is perfect when you can't add anything, nor can you take anything away. So there's a, I'm using the overlay of the visual arts. But anyway, I had to interrupt because this is a question that people shouldn't be asking you. Anyway, go ahead.
I love that answer, and I'm going to use it. So the next project is Birds on the Water. Very much like Holding Demons, I usually get triggered by an event, and I feel like I really need to write about it. So Birds on the Water is actually the story of a migrant girl from West Africa crossing the seas to Europe, and talks about sort of her being the sole survivor of a boat drowning. I really felt like, for some reason, that story really called to me, and the name came to me before even the words, and so that's something that I've been working on now, and I'm very excited about being able to sort of pursue and keep writing my way through that.
I've shared this sentiment with Jasmine. Whenever we use birds, we always think about freedom and flying and pursuing dreams, but this is almost like birds on the water. Where she's going and then what she encountered in the water as it's already, I already have tons of ideas of how to illustrate this imagery of sort of freedom versus survival. So,
and it's interesting because there's the theory that, evolutionary theory that the birds came from the water, right? So the birds are the closest ancestors to fish and yet can't go home again, right? Just like an immigrant can't exactly go home again. I wanted to ask Jasmine, with the Sierra Leone Civil War, do you have at your fingertips a knowledge about how many folks lost their lives in that conflict?
God, I don't have the exact numbers, but it was definitely in the thousands.
Thousands, yeah. And did you lose any close folks?
We lost extended family members, yes.
Yeah. And how old were you when the war was going on?
So it was going on since 91. My family returned to Sierra Leone from Europe in 93. And initially it sort of didn't hit where we were, which is the capital city, Freetown, till around 97. So 97 was when we, my family and I first encountered it, really sort of it entering the city. And then we came back from 97, and it came back to the city, Freetown, in 99. So and I was about 7 and 9.
So I got one more question for you on this. Do you dream about it, the conflict?
I don't think I've dreamt about it for a very long time. I think Holding Demons was sort of was a dream in itself. Right? It was me writing it down so I could write about other things, so my mind could go into other places. Yeah, this is the catharsis, right, that we hear about so much in theatrical performances from the Greek times on, yeah? Gail, you're writing away over there. What you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking about some of the relationship this book has to the literature on grief and loss, creative coping strategies. We don't have a lot of time, but Jasmine, it feels to me that your telling of this story is the way that you have honored really the very first principle of how people can successfully head toward the path of healing, which is giving voice to sorrow. So you've expressed in very subtle ways the emotions, the mix of feelings, the regrets, the sadness, the silence, the people who held back and weren't courageous enough at the time to defend their friends and neighbors. You've given voice to the mix of feelings. And that is, in all the research literature, particularly in the UK, Colin Parkes, very famous bereavement psychiatrist, that's the fundamental first step. But what I notice about the story is that with the exception of your voice, none of the other characters has been able to articulate and process and express those vital feelings. And that really is the first step toward heading toward a path of healing, not necessarily recovery, but healing. So I just wanted to mention, Jasmine is on that road. None of her characters have reached it yet.
Isn't that interesting? So, yeah, she's the pilot. Just want to finish the half hour with just a quick little reading from Chapter 2 from Holding Demons in Small Jars. Jasmine Kumalah and Si Jie Loo, co-collaborators. Si Jie is the illustrator, Jasmine is the author. The streets to the bay where the bodies were found were a maze. Women clutched children between their legs, and men in the midst of curse-filled rants navigated this waiting room of life. Waiting for death or something else. Maybe hope, the hope they had given up to live in this stifling oven. Maybe that. Those who stayed too long lost their minds. Or something else, something even more hidden. He could see it, their bodies taut with unfulfilled promise. And that's, the poetry of Jasmine Kumalah as she witnessed and went through in her very young years, for many years, the devastation in Freeport of the Sierra Leone's war, and turned it into a success story that we had the privilege of doing a book opening here at the Squire Foundation in Santa Barbara because of Si Jie Loo's illustrations, and she was a fellow there. What a wonderful, wonderful story. Kind of came full circle, didn't it, Gail? It's really fascinating, and just a credit to the survival and the braveness of these young women, I got to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye,
you so
Jasmine,
much.
for now. We'll talk soon again, I'm sure. And dear listener, don't turn that dial. We'll be back with a special guest in relation to a new theatrical performance, 35 millimeter.
Tu mini pa ke kun ka adai na e suma min te mentoy fale ko